there is something about the sort of personalized advising experience that we're able to provide at a smaller school that I think really helps students usher in ideas about what they want to do and where they want to go and what they want to do after they graduate.
Welcome to Mastering the Numbers. I'm your host, Joe Mallo. My guest today is Kelly McGee. She is the director at the Center for Global Programs at Denison University. Kelly, thanks very much for taking part in my interview series.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be on.
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of wanted to get started, but can you just share with the audience a little bit more about the Center for Global Programs at Denison?
Yeah, sure. Yes, that's right. I'm the director for the Center for Global Programs at Denison University, and we really oversee four components of operations within the institution. The first is off-campus study. So any student who goes on a study abroad program or a study away program, we do have study away programs in the US, that falls under us. We also provide international student support. Denison is about 17% international students. So we have quite a few international students, big demographic within our college. We have the multilingual learning office, which provides support for any person on campus who is studying or working in another language other than English. And we also have a global living community, which I like to say is just a posh word for a dorm for students who are interested in all things global. We have a lot of students who come back from their off-campus study experience who are interested in living there. We have some international students that are interested in living there, athletes. So those are sort of the four pillars of what we do.
Okay. And how long have you been at Denison?
2 years.
2 years? Okay, awesome.
Been in
Well,
this for 2 years.
to dig in a little bit deeper, higher education and business practice can sometimes seem very, very different. Two different sides of the operational world, but I think they have a lot of overlap. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I agree. I think that what's important to know is that in higher ed, all decisions that are made across an institution, so for example, with us, internally within our center and externally to our center across the college or outside of the institution, all decisions that are made have multiple stakeholders involved, just like any business or company. So, for us, obviously, our primary stakeholders are students. So we have our students, we have parents, faculty, staff, senior leadership, donors, um, third-party providers and contractors that we work with. So there are multiple stakeholders in decisions that are made across the institution. And I think that a lot of those decisions that are made have, you know, at least maybe not so obviously, but most decisions that are made have a business element to them. Whether we're talking about actual money or not is another question, but there are business strategies to making decisions. And there are a lot of people, obviously, that those decisions affect. And again, of course, our primary stakeholder is our students. So,
Yeah, you see and you hear a lot about decisions that are being made at the university level to help make sure that the students are taken care of properly, that the university continues to grow and stay,
right.
to stay on course. So you hear a lot about that, especially lately.
Right, exactly. Most decisions that are made, we have to keep in mind that we need the institution to be financially healthy. And, that's key to keeping the operation going. So
Because not every university has a one or a two or a $5 billion endowment. Is that
exactly.
accurate?
Yeah, exactly. That's right. And we do,
Yeah.
we're a very financially healthy institution. So we're lucky, but we're also smart.
It takes both. It
Right.
takes both of us. So,
Exactly.
are there any common misconceptions, about the relationship between business and higher education? And if so, how do you address them?
Yeah, I think this is a great question. I think that one common misconception is that people in academia or academics, people that work at institutions of higher education or that are just in the industry or the field in general are anti-business. And I don't think that that's correct. I think that those folks like me and like my colleagues, it's not that we're anti-business, it's that we want the business interests of education and of our institutions to be focused on students. And we want those decisions that are made to benefit students and to ensure that we're providing the best service, the best support, the best education that we can, while also preparing those students for a world outside the walls of the institution after they graduate. So I think that's probably the biggest misconception is that academics are anti-business. And that's simply not true. We just want our business practices and our business interests as a whole to benefit our students.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I mean, they're there to learn. They're paying to go there, so you have to take care of the kids. So, what are some of the biggest challenges or struggles that you have to overcome with a program like this?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, most of what we do, a lot of what we do is directly related, for example, to world events, um, changes in leadership, changes in political leadership. So, when there is a change in the federal government, so we've just gone through one, there will obviously be changes to funding streams. There will be changes to practices. A great example of just a geopolitical event that is completely out of our control, the war in Ukraine. Many programs, many off-campus study programs, um, I don't want to use the word suffered necessarily, but there was impact, definitely impact to certain off-campus study programs in the region, which means that those students have to go somewhere else. So you can sort of see from this just kind of a broad brushstrokes example that geopolitical events, changes in leadership, shifts in cultural practices, these big kind of moments that we don't really have much control over can keep us on our toes. And the way that we advise students, the way that institutions are able to recruit students from overseas. There are obviously a lot of changes right now happening or that are coming around sort of immigration and visa regulations and so forth. And we have to adapt to all of that. So, it's interesting because there are these day-to-day challenges that we face, just like a business or a company, but then also just like a business or a company, there are these broad, sweeping moments that we have to sort of pivot with.
Do you feel like at the higher education level that they have the ability to pivot relatively quickly? Do you have to pivot relatively quickly, or does it take a little bit of time to get things in place?
Yeah, I think the answer is that both things are true.
Yeah.
Denison, for example, we're a pretty small institution and we are all about relationships. And so we know everyone, our center and our office is connected to everyone on campus. And so when we need to communicate information or, we do have, I mean, sometimes things happen. We have emergencies. And when we need to communicate information, we're able to do that in a very timely fashion and quickly and ensure that all people that should be aware are aware. And I think that that's more challenging when you're working at a larger institution, when
Yeah.
it's much different when you're working with 30,000 students as opposed to 2,500, 3,000 students. So.
Yeah, I would imagine. So I can't imagine how much that goes on inside a program like this and how busy you are on a day-to-day basis to keep it running properly. So how do you maintain a level of balance between your professional and your personal life?
Yeah, well, I this is going to be a controversial thing to say, but I actually invite my professional life into my personal life. And I don't mean by hovering over email at 10 p.m. I mean, I think that everyone has to draw some boundaries around sort of the office logistics, right? But when I'm on my personal time and there are ideas that popcorn into my brain, I just invite them in and think about them. And a lot of my personal time overlaps with what I do professionally. I love to travel. I travel a lot for my job, but I also love to do personal travel. And so I try to use those opportunities as ways to think about processes and sort of what our next steps are in the center and professionally. And, that's also to say that at the same time, I recognize that that's not something that is right for everyone by any means. So, I encourage my team and my staff to log off. But for me, I think it's important when you're talking about balancing personal life and professional life to do what's right for you. And for me, if I think about something and I have an idea that comes to me, I want to work on it. That's what makes me feel accomplished. So,
Yeah, I've never believed that balance was 50-50. That's
right,
not,
right,
that doesn't happen for anybody. You have to find the right percentage on each side of the equation,
right. That's a great
and
point.
yeah, and to go back to what you said about ideas popping in your head, if you don't capture them, whether it's on a recorder or on a piece of paper, I always say, what's the likelihood that you'll capture the same thought, 5 hours later
Right,
when you sit down to think about it
right,
again?
right.
So,
That's right. That's right.
yeah, you have to capture it when you can. So, um, so what are your biggest motivators in developing this program and in your career?
Yeah, I would have to say my colleagues. When I go to work, I think everyone has probably at some point been in a job in which, you're thinking, you wake up in the morning, you're thinking, oh gosh, not again. Here we are. And in my job, I never feel that way. Even when I'm tired, even when it's been a hard day, a hard week, I wake up and I feel really excited to go to my job because my colleagues are motivated and they have great ideas, and that motivates me. Um, I I like that we're about ideas and we're willing to try things and willing to take risks within reason. And if something doesn't work out, we just pivot. But I think that really it's important to have people that surround you that are just as motivated as you are and have just as much sort of an interest in the success of your operation and
Yeah.
the success in our case, the success of our students. And it's very it's motivating, but it's also humbling to be able to do that on a daily basis.
And not everybody has a chance to do what you and your colleagues had a chance to do. Very
Right.
few.
Right.
So
Taking advantage of the opportunity is really important.
absolutely. So what are some of the biggest changes that are happening, not just in higher education, but in a global program like this?
Yeah. No, it's a great question because I think there's a common misconception that just after the pandemic that these types of operations just bounced back. Everything went back to normal, and that's really not the case. We often speak in this field about pre-COVID and post-COVID, as many people do in their jobs and in their industries and where they work. But for us, there was a pre-COVID time when operations were just running.
Yeah.
And then, obviously, as in many other industries, the travel industry completely shut down. Colleges and universities went remote, and a lot of institutions. We aren't having this problem at Denison, but institutions generally have seen sort of a slower bounce back to pre-COVID numbers for students who want to study off campus. And I think that there are a lot of factors that play into that, but we are really fortunate that because we're so small and because we're so interconnected and we communicate so well across the institution and with our students, and they come for orientation and their parents hear about what we do, and our numbers have never been better, to be honest. But there are also a lot of ancillary challenges sort of around running off-campus study programs, insofar that it is true that students these days are interested in, for example, mainly flagship cities in Europe. So we want to think about how we can motivate students to go to sort of less traveled destinations. We have a lot of partners and providers that provide programs for students in, locations, for example, in Latin America. We would love to see students go there. But there's been a lot of shifting around of interests and priorities. And of course, um, families are always asking about how do we pay for this? And, for us, we have a financial model in place that provides a lot of opportunities for students who might otherwise not think it would be possible for them to study off campus. But many other institutions aren't in that position. And so, there are just, I think, industry wide and higher ed wide, there are a lot of challenges in terms of the quote bounce back post COVID. And that's still very much at the forefront of a lot of conversations in international education.
I mentioned before that I have a 17-year-old and
Right,
he's a senior in high school. So we've been on tours. We've been on university tours,
right.
and I think where they promote it the most and where they talk about it the most is a lot of the smaller universities that we've been to, um, as opposed to the ones like you said earlier that have 30, 40, 50,000 students in them. So
Yeah,
it just seems like in the smaller universities, it's a core part of what they're promoting, the opportunity to study in a different country,
that's right.
which
That's right.
which in my opinion, studying in different countries, I mean, I feel like that would help tremendously in the business world,
Yes,
and within your
yes.
career. So
Exactly. I mean, I think that, it is a core part of, or I think a lot of students see it as a core part of their college experience at Denison. And, again, no shade to large state institutions. I grew up in large state institutions. And I had great experiences, but there is something about the sort of personalized advising experience that we're able to provide at a smaller school that I think really helps students usher in ideas about what they want to do, and where they want to go and what they want to do after they graduate.
yeah. Yeah, it seems like the smaller, like I said, smaller universities, smaller colleges really focused on it. From what I've seen, I like that. I like that. Hopefully, my son will have an opportunity.
Hope so,
Um,
yeah.
so, if you look at the other universities and colleges as competitors, I know they're not maybe on the athletic fields, but
Mhm.
if you look at them as competitors, how do you stay ahead of the other universities that are doing or have maybe similar programs?
Yeah, I think this is a great question. And I think it's it's interesting because I think in a lot of ways we in our center, in our office, we're really competing with ourselves most of the time.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is thinking about, okay, we had an idea, we tried X idea, and it didn't go as well as we'd hoped. Okay, so how do we do it better? Or how do we change it? Or how do we pivot? How do we ensure that, okay, we had a student who faced some challenges on a program last semester. How do we ensure that the students going next semester don't face those same challenges? And I'm using pretty general examples, but I think that we're so focused on trying to ensure that we have successful, fulfilled, happy students who can really become global citizens, we're competing with ourselves in our own programming and in our own initiatives and how we spend our money and the choices that we make. So yeah, I think that's one answer. And I think the other answer is that, it's interesting to be at a small school, particularly a small school in Ohio, because there are several of them, as you know, and and we share a lot of ideas. And so often it's the case that there will be an email thread started from, sister schools nearby with questions. And would you mind if I use this language, or would you mind if I took this idea, or can we come and shadow you for a day? Um, so I would say that we're really competing with ourselves in many ways.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that because on a corporate level, they're not going to share that same information, right?
Right.
So it's nice that there's so much collaboration going on at the higher education level. So, and I can see that where there would be a lot more collaboration than from large corporation to large corporation.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that's right.
So, what do you find most challenging about higher education?
Well, I think one answer to that is that the only constant is change.
Right.
And so, you really, I think that in this field, particularly in international education, if you can accept that there's always going to be change happening, nothing is permanent, nothing is forever, no matter how well it's working, that's if you can take that approach and just sort of metabolize it, your challenges will be not necessarily easier, but a lot easier to face.
Right.
So, so I think that, and especially again, especially with in the last few years, the ways that this field has had to adapt to just external forces has really demonstrated its ability, our ability to pivot and sway with the wind. And it's not always going to be right. It's not always going to be successful. It's not always going to be, people aren't always going to be smiling at the end of the day. But if you can just accept that the only constant is change, it will make facing challenges it will make them sting a lot less.
It's, and change is never going to stop. Doesn't matter what the organization is. So, where do you see your global program in the next, let's say, 2 to 3 years?
Yeah. Well, like I said, I think that, like I said before, there's a lot of concentrated interest, in certain areas of the world. We have a lot of students who, um, just for context, I guess this year, let's see, we're still working with students who went to high school during the pandemic. And those students have a lot of different needs than students did previously, and that students may need coming up. It's going to be interesting to see what that looks like when those students who were in high school during the pandemic sort of phase out. But I think that what it looks like is continuing to adapt to the evolving needs of our students. I think when I studied abroad, I remember um, I was fortunate. My parents sent me with traveler's checks. So I know you and I both remember traveler's checks, but
I do.
there's a lot there's a lot that is changing and changing really, really quickly. So I think what it looks like is us continuing to meet our students where we need to meet them.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that right now, students, I don't want to say the word need, but they are appreciative of more concentrated advising and conversations and having a personalized experience that they may not have otherwise had before. And, we don't want to infantilize students. We don't want to hold their hands through anything, but we want to give them information appropriate to them that empowers them to be successful on their programs. And so I would say that, that's sort of our focus in the next couple of years is trying to ensure that we're empowering students to be successful on their programs and to embrace an experience that is going to make them better global citizens, better business leaders, better, whatever they choose to do after graduation.
Right.
So
Um,
that's what we're focused on.
I think the amount of help and guidance that a smaller university can provide, I think, is so powerful. My son chose a small Ohio school over a much larger school for those exact reasons.
Yeah.
He felt there was going to be a lot more support and a lot more guidance, which
Yeah.
he liked. So,
Yeah.
I
That's
think
great.
I think everybody should look into some of the the smaller schools. There's a lot to be gained. So,
That's great.
as you've been growing this program at Denison, and I know this isn't your first stop, you've been doing this for a long time. What's some of the best business advice that you've ever received in growing these programs?
I think that I think that and I know that I probably sound like a broken record, but keeping decisions student centered. I mean, I talked a little bit about at the beginning about how decisions that are made affect multiple stakeholders, right? Not only across the institution, but external to the college. But if you can go into making business related decisions and ensure that those decisions have the best interests of the students, I don't think that even if there is, even if there are questions, even if you're facing challenges, whether those are financial challenges or programming challenges, whatever those challenges are, if you can confidently say that the decisions you're making are student-centered, you can have a conversation about how to pivot or how to make the outcome better.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
great. So, final question. I'll stop peppering you with questions. Let's say you ran into a student who wants to study abroad. They're nervous to take that step, or maybe they're nervous because of the monetary aspect to it. What would you tell them?
I would say that it's possible for anyone to study. So first of all, for the financial part, it's possible to study abroad, even if you have financial challenges, financial concerns. You're worried about even just spending money. We have students who come all the time that are able to sort of, you know, everything else is covered or they're able to pay for everything
Yeah,
else, but they're worried about spending money.
yeah,
We have a lot of conversations around that. And I would say that it's still possible for you to study abroad. In terms of being apprehensive, I would say that, you know, I understand, first of all, but there are a lot of options if you don't want to spend an entire semester abroad, which some
yeah,
students don't. Some students don't want to be away for an entire semester. A lot of students want to be on campus during football season, for example. Completely understandable. But what I would say is, okay, you're apprehensive about studying abroad for a semester. What if I told you that you could study abroad over the summer, or you could study abroad on a short-term trip led by a faculty member? I think that sort of communicating to students that the idea that is maybe cemented in their head isn't the only option can really open a lot of doors and sort of just encourage them to understand that taking risks, even if they're small risks, ultimately are going to, work towards our common goal of making sure that they're equipped to be the best global citizens possible when they leave college. So,
yeah. I
but
think that's
giving
good
them
advice.
options, I think giving
Yeah.
them options is the biggest. Now, some people will say choice is a prison, and I have been known to say that as well. But I think in this case, making sure that students have options is really, really crucial.
So it's probably important for that student to make sure that they go see their counselor or their mentor or their department head
Right.
to talk through the options. And
Exactly.
so great.
Exactly.
Very good bits of advice. Listen, I really appreciate you taking some time out to spend it with me on this podcast. If anybody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to find you?
Yeah, sure. I am, well, first of all, thank you for having me. This
Yeah.
was a lot of fun. Um, but yeah, I think the best way is to find me on LinkedIn. You can search me. My first name is actually Theodora, so you can search me as Theodora Kelly McGee, and I'm probably the only one. So, um, so that's probably the best way to reach me. I'm on LinkedIn all the time, and I've
Yeah.
fixed my settings now so that when people message me, it alerts me. For a long time, I would open that inbox and it's like stacked with stuff. I'm like, oh my gosh, I've missed all these messages from people. But that would be great. And you can also find my contact information just by searching the Center for Global Programs, Denison. It's on there. And if you saw a little head popping up during the interview, it's my mini dachshund. He's on my lap right now. So it occurred to me that he might have made an appearance.
Well, I think we've made it through the podcast without my dog barking at the UPS driver or something like that. So I think we made it through okay. We made it
Did
through
it.
okay. So first of all, once again, I really appreciate you taking part. And before we end, I'd like to just do a little shout out to my marketing team, Alyssa and Lisa from Check Off Your List in Columbus. They're the ones that make the podcast look really nice and get them out to everybody so they can see them. But Kelly, thank you very much. You have a great week, and
Thank you,
I
Joe.
look forward to hearing more about the program in the future.
Likewise. Thank you.
All right, take care.
Take
Bye.
care.
You've just tuned into another episode of Mastering the Numbers. We hope you found valuable insight to boost your financial success. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite platform and leave us a review. Keep pushing forward, and thanks for listening.